Hello everyone and welcome back to the second part of my discussion with David Matthews. Today we will take a closer look at the operations of the digital air traffic control tower. Now let's move on to the next major topic of our today's conversation, because obviously aviation is one of the industries that experiences constantly a very high degree of digitalization. And ATC in this particular case, and in case of London City Airport, is no different. A couple of weeks ago, NATS went live with the digital remote tower to operate at London City Airport. Can you please tell us what was the major trigger behind this project?
Yeah, so the major trigger, well, it was twofold really. Firstly, the airport has a development plan, and they've delivered sort of half of it. Now mainly the airside elements of it, and it was that which was triggering the need to have a new tower. Because effectively the development of the airfield was just going to grow around the existing tower, and it wasn't going to be optimally sited any more, both in terms of its distance to the main runway holding points, and also the sight lines to the far eastern end of the airfield. And the second aspect of it was also that the existing tower was original to the construction of the airport, so it was built back in 1987. The fabric of the building was probably in need of a bit of a refresh, and also some of the ATC assets that we use to provide the service, while definitely not originating from back as far as 1987, were just due for their sort of regular cycle of replacement. So there was sort of twofold element: the impact on the line of sight with the airport developing and growing up around the old tower. The old tower is only about sort of 15 meters tall. They're not very big. So as soon as you start constructing anything reasonably sized near it, with the new stands that were due to be that were constructed to the east, the parallel taxiway that was out to the M27 threshold, it was effectively compromising the view that the controllers would get from the tower. So the main reason was effectively that London City needed a new control tower. That's the fundamental reason for it.
Brilliant. And what would be the main benefits of operating such a digital tower compared to the conventional on-site ones?
Sure. So different airports, I think, are interested in digital tower technology for different reasons. In terms of London City, they needed a new control tower. So when you're looking at what to build as a replacement control tower, you can go down the conventional. We'll just build a new conventional control tower, or you can look at building a digital control tower. There are some efficiencies with regards to the digital control tower in that it's generally speaking it's cheaper to build and cheaper to maintain. If you don't need, and the reason for that is that the digital control tower on site at the airport isn't occupied by staff, so you can start to you don't need to provide facilities in the building because it's not an occupied space. It can be a bit more functional. You don't need I always use the example at Heathrow and Gatwick, both of the towers. When you get up to the 9th or 10th floors, right to the top, there are toilets up there. Understandably so, because but even just to engineer facilities like that, literally 50 odd meters up in the building is not necessarily a cheap thing to do. And
that's very true.
Digital tower, you don't need to do that sort of thing. The other reasons the airports are interested in this sort of thing is that you can provide ATC at airports where you might not have had ATC before. And also new airports. So Saab with LFV in Sweden, a new airport opened, the Scandinavian Mountains Airport. And that's an entirely brand new airport, and it was built with a digital tower with no air traffic controllers based there. So and I think that's because it was primarily a seasonal airport, and quite remote. Other advantages are, you could, if you wanted to, consolidate multiple airport towers into one location, and effectively then you could potentially look at generating some efficiencies by multiply skilled staff across numerous airport towers. We again, Saab and LFE have done that at their airport tower centre at Sundsvall. And then finally, the advantage, I suppose, really regarding digital versus conventional is that by digitizing the view out of the window, there are enhancements that you can leverage in terms of there's more tools and more tool support available to you by digitizing it, whether that's tracking out of the window, so sort of box and follow type arrangements, or you can the pan tilt zoom cameras, which replicate the binocular functionality. Again, they can be trained to scan and track objects, and all of that just makes it easier to the controller, enables them to have sort of less heads down time and more heads up time looking out the window, which is what we want them to do, because that's, I say window and the digital tower, that's it's screens, but effectively they are windows. So the more sort of heads up time that you can give a controller, generally speaking, the better and the safer it is.
And I think it's also fairly safe to say that with the constant development of artificial intelligence and augmented reality, it just really comes together really well also in the perspective of future enhancement, like you say, or the tools that you can apply. Bolt onto it.
Absolutely. So what you've effectively got is a surveillance system. We in ATC we think of surveillance systems as radars. But ultimately, if you've got a camera array, it's effectively the same thing. And then, whilst we haven't done this at London City, the platform is there for it to be potentially expanded in that you can then put some sort of AI on that, as you say, and use that to improve the efficiency of generally how the airport or the airside operation works.
And when it comes to the principles of operating such a tower, where is the actual center of operation for this one? And to operate it, does it really require any specific training, or it's no really different in this respect?
Sure. So different manufacturers have different technical solutions. So for London City, we did run a competitive tender for the visual element of the digital tower solution, and we chose Saab as the technology provider for that. But there are other companies out there. Sea Ridge as one that does have technical solutions in this area. The actual specifics of the technical solution for London City is that it's at the top of a 50-meter mast, so that there is a mast building at the airport, which in terms of where you site it, you use exactly the same principles as you would do for a normal conventional control tower. So it's beam the midpoint of the runway. It's sufficiently high so that you can see what you need to see. It gives you the right angle of view. So 50 meters taller than the city, and on top of that is a camera housing, and inside the camera housing is 14 high definition cameras arranged in a circle, which creates the visual panorama. And that's displayed at the digital tower operations control room, which is based at the Swanwick Centre down on the south coast. And that panorama is then displayed on a video wall. It's in a sort of horseshoe shape, so that it vaguely replicates a conventional control tower. It's slightly compressed though into 225 degrees, so it's not a full wraparound. It still gives you 360 degrees of view, but it's condensed into 225 degrees. The benefit of that is that the controller can see behind them without actually looking physically behind them, and that's the bit that actually takes just a little bit of getting used to. So as well as the 14 cameras which provide the panorama, there's also two pan tilt zoom cameras which I mentioned. So they replicate the binocular functionality, and they provide a sort of picture-in-picture display on the video wall. It's quite nice because actually you can have your pan tilt zoom camera set up on a particular screen that might be a bit more of a doesn't show you as as much as the airfield as the other screen, so it's a sort of more dead space of the video wall, and so you can have that open and still see the panorama. Whereas actually in a conventional tower, as soon as you put the binoculars up to your head, all you can see is what's through the binoculars. You lose all that wider sort of situational awareness that you would have. So that's quite a nice feature, as well as the tracking and the scanning that I've sort of already mentioned. In terms of training, yeah, it does require a specific what we call conversion training. So we had a training plan that was approved by the regulator. We mixed it up into a combination of general familiarization, because there's sort of softer elements to the training that we took care of first, just in terms of actually moving to a different site. Where do they go when they get there? All this sort of stuff. Where's the restroom? Where's the canteen? All that sort of stuff needs to be sort of taken care of as well. It's not just simply telling them how to use the operation. It's a sort of we moved a unit from one place right down to the south coast. So it was around all that sort of stuff needs to be taken into account as well. And then we did a distance learning package with the guys, and that was focused much more on the actual technical changes. And then there was on-site live operational learning. So we got them in the room for a couple of days, and they actually got to play with the equipment before we transitioned. All that was assessed as well, and signed off. And yeah, overall really successful training package, and that was reflected in the so after we transitioned, we needed to effectively survey the controllers after the transition for our own assurance that they were sufficiently comfortable, embedded, understood felt that they themselves could operate safely, as well as was what our opinion was of how they were performing, but their also opinion of themselves of how they were operating, and the feedback that we got was really good. So all in all, really really exciting change, really and yeah, really exciting change for the industry generally, actually, and really pleasing to see that it passed off so well.
Very interesting indeed, and I bet it was really, like I said, exciting to be the part of this initiative as well. But moving all the benefits and obviously the obvious improvements and the efficiencies that this solution offers, something that you mentioned about air traffic control in general is moving planes from A to B in a safe manner, and safety is always the number one priority for aviation. When it comes to the precision and accurate timing for the airspace operation in general, is there any delay in the data transmission from those camera feeds going to the actual center of operation? Is it even of any concern, or it's just so marginal that it wouldn't really make any difference here?
Yeah. So with any data communications over a network, that there is always a small delay, and that happens now at regular towers. So controllers in a conventional control tower, they're sending and receiving data from radio transmitters, receivers, radar sites that are dotted sometimes tens, hundreds of miles away, that are all connected by fiber network. So, but the fact the matter is because it's fiber end to end, the delay is minuscule and imperceptible. So for the voice comms latency, it's of the order of sort of single digit milliseconds. And the regulatory requirement for the delay of the visual presentation is actually so the regulatory requirement is a second delay. So that's what's allowable. But actually, when you look at what we actually achieve, we're nowhere near that level of latency. So to all intents and purposes, it looks, it feels, it sounds exactly as if they were in a control tower at that location on the top of the 50 masts themselves, and that's the way that that it was designed, and that's the way they operate it.
Amazing. Really interesting times. And another thing that I really need to ask, because, latency and the efficiency of data transmission. Yeah, you mentioned a fair point. It's not only visual, because there's all the other communications and the transmissions bit behind what is visible on the screen. But what about any sort of contingency mechanisms, even cybersecurity concerns? in this type of digital air traffic control tower?
So safety, resilience, cybersecurity, these are our highest priorities during the project. They continue to be so now that it's in operational service. So a lot of the details associated with that are understandably sort of sensitive, but suffice to say that those requirements were embedded right from the very start in the design of the project and implemented and incredibly rigorously tested. Both prior to the operational transition and also now that it's still in service.
And finally, after the successful launch of this technology, can you tell us what, in your opinion, is it gonna become like a new trend, and we can just expect and see more and more of a wider adoption of this technology and solution? Or have you experienced any sort of reluctance that you can expect as well for whatever reason? And what about the user acceptance finally as well? So what the actual operators, ATC officers think of this solution and working in this type of environment?
So I think initially there was quite a lot of skepticism from all sorts of stakeholders right from um, at the start. I think generally the more that people found out about the technology as we took them on the journey, and this applies to all the stakeholders, whether it be regulator, airline staff, the more that people find out about it, the more understanding that they become of it, and accepting of it. It's very similar to any other change program. The emotions and what have you are very similar. I think the one thing to note, particularly from a staff side of things, was we were moving people's places of work quite significantly from the centre of London up to the south coast of the UK, and that was difficult. I think it was difficult for all of them, and then there was we put a lot of work into easing that transition for them and for their families, but at the same time you can't really get over the fundamentals that it was a big shift for all of them, and at times that was very difficult for them. That's not to be underestimated. In terms of the future of technology, I think it's still evolving. It's still developing. The nature of control towers, when they're built, they're built for a considerable length of time. They're not cheap things, and so I don't think you're going to see a rash of people knocking down control towers and going to digital straight away.
Only to replace them. Yeah.
I think it's much more that as control towers come up for replacement, just by virtue of the fact that they're coming towards end of life, as we were at London City, that digital tower technology becomes a very realistic possibility for people to consider.
No revolution, but more like an evolution.
Yeah,
it's a natural step.
Yeah, and I think also some of the technology actually, you don't need to necessarily go whole hog and move to a fully new digital tower. There's some aspects of the technology that actually you can just embed in your existing control tower to solve a particular problem, and I think that's really important that you don't ever lose sight of. Start with what problem are you trying to solve? If you come to it with the idea of I like this technology, we're going to use it, it's the wrong way round. You need to start with what problem am I trying to solve, and what's the best way of me solving that. And sometimes digital tower technology will be the right solution, sometimes it won't be. I think that's if you come at it from that angle, you'll end up better off. In terms of explaining to people particularly around the safety aspects of it, I think whilst we talk about it as being very important for the industry and very innovative, which it is, the fundamentals of the sort of safety arguments that we're using are not dissimilar to what we've been doing for decades. So if you look at what we do and what we have done at our area control centres, whether that be Swanwick, whether that be Prestwick, or whether that be West Drayton before Swanwick, what we're doing is we're taking data sources, radar data, voice communications information from multiple sites dotted all over the country, and putting it at a central location for controllers to use and operate. In terms of digital towers, we're doing exactly that same same thing. We're just doing it with visual data rather than with radar data.
Yeah.
So
So it's
our
only like an extension, really, and no change.
Yeah, absolutely. So our experience in terms of how we secure data over long distances, how we transmit it over those sorts of distances, how controllers use it to talk to, to planes to instruct them to, to give them clearances. It's, we literally as an organisation have decades of experience of that sort of thing, and so it's just applying that institutional experience and to a new solution. So in some ways, from a safety perspective, it's not that different and it's not that new. But actually, in terms of when you look at it and say, oh, well, actually, yeah, we are remoting a control tower, it is new. But that's the bit to keep hold of. So in terms of the future, I think it will just depend on airports just considering what it is that they need, and whether that's a new control tower, whether they're thinking about a contingency facility, or whether their current control tower is somewhere constraining their expansion, whether it's occupying some real estate that they could better use, or whether their current control tower is not optimally sited for whatever airfield development that they've got planned. It makes sense for them to have a look at this type of technology as a very competitive alternative to building a conventional control tower.
Perfect. Thank you very much for sharing all your knowledge, experience, and insights both into the ATC operations role, but also operating the digital tower that got launched just a couple of weeks ago. Let me wish you all the best in your new role at Heathrow, and hopefully let's see some significant recovery and increase in the traffic volumes, also for your offices as well.
Thanks, Hubert. Yeah, let's hope so.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for listening to this final episode of the second season of Eba Consulting Podcast. We would like to wish you all the very best. Stay tuned for more, and we hope to see you again in future.